Hi guys, George Finney again. I'm here to help you be more well aware when it comes to cybersecurity. This is the 6th in our series of master classes. We're on the 5th cybersecurity habit of the 9 cybersecurity habits. This week we're talking about my favorite habit. It's hard not to play favorites with all of my 9 habits, but culture is really my favorite habit. I think there's a most important habit. But for some reason, I just kind of geek out on when it comes to culture. And I think the theme for this week is habitual culture. Culture I don't think is something that's kind of always in the background that maybe we don't necessarily think about. But I think being intentional when it comes to culture is really the focus and the key for this week. And so we always start with a story, and so the story we'll start with this week is about this man. His name is Robin Dunbar. It's actually Dr. Robin Dunbar, and he studied. He's kind of a crypto, zoologist or an evolutionary psychologist. He's won the Nobel Prize for having the coolest title of any scientist. That's a joke. He didn't actually win the Nobel Prize, as far as I'm aware. But he studied primates, and he made this observation that's come to be known as the Dunbar number. So it's always cool when you get a number named after you. But the idea was, as he's studying these different kinds of primates, right? So sometimes he would follow chimpanzees, other times he would follow gorillas. And he realized that they were always traveling in specific size groups. So usually, maybe it could have been 50, could have been 5 or 10 or 20. And he thought, well, that's weird. I wonder how come the size is always the same. And he did something that was kind of revolutionary. He also kind of looked at the size of the neocortex of the brain of these different groups of primates, and he realized that the size of the groups that they travel in is actually proportional. So there's this ratio of the size of the neocortex to the size of the group. And it lines up with all primates, and humans are also a primate. And it turns out this Dunbar's number also applies to humans. And it turns out that number for humans is about 150. So, and this kind of makes some intuitive sense. So, when you think about, your relationships, right? You probably have a couple of really important relationships. So maybe your spouse, or other significant other, family members, or your boss. So those are really in this core group, and probably those take the majority of your mental CPU cycles. But all of the relationships that you have some sort of mental workload that you have to go through in order to stay connected with those groups. And as you expand out through these little bubbles, your total personal network, it turns out, is about 150. And in the early days of Facebook, they found that most people were having groups of people that were about 150 close friends. There have been studies around organizations themselves, and some organizations have actually sized their divisions or their departments or factories to have 150 people in them, because they feel like that's the right number of people that can really successfully work together and connect with one another. That also, incidentally, is the size of certain military units, dating all the way back to the Romans. And again, that size matters. Because that's how we connect with with groups and how we work together. And so I think everything that happens outside that number, outside that 150 number, really requires exponentially more processing power than our brains actually have. So cool. Well, how do we deal with people outside of that number? Well, we've evolved an app for that. And it turns out we call that app inside our brains a specific name, and we call it culture, as you might have guessed from this week's habit. Um, so this is my favorite hermit crab here. You always know, I mean, everybody knows who Charles Darwin was, right? You know, father of evolution in terms of theories. But most people don't remember that he actually had a co-author for that paper. So he and another gentleman for 10 years before they actually published were separately developing this idea of evolution. And it wasn't really until this other guy called Darwin, well, they didn't call him at the time, he wrote him a letter. He kind of said, hey, I've got this idea. I've seen some of the things that you're writing. And, you know, they really independently co-discovered this, like, mysteriously right at the same time. So nobody remembers who he was. Obviously, you know, Darwin gets all the credit here. But his name was Alfred Russel Wallace. And he had this interesting theory about what was next in terms of evolution, specifically for human beings. And his theory was that we were going to continue to evolve and grow as a creature because of this thing that we have called culture. He believed that culture was really an accelerator when it came to what our minds were capable of, right? And when you think about it in terms of, you know, computers, I think about it in terms of extra processing power. So, you know, when I think of the way that Russell Wallace talked about culture, you know, you can really think of things like stereotypes, and stereotypes can sometimes be good. You know, sometimes they're bad. But really, what we've done in terms of stereotypes, I think this is really easy to understand. We've already kind of we've let something like a stereotype or culture, you know, we've pre-processed those thoughts, so we can just accept them and move on. Or sometimes maybe we need to re-examine them. But Wallace kind of introduced this idea of culture being like the shell of a hermit crab. So this is fascinating, right? You know, I'm kind of picturing, you know, myself and, you know, my brain with a just giant shell around it, labeled culture. But, you know, just like with the hermit crab, you know, sometimes we can let go of one shell, one culture, and move on to the next. And sometimes we grow as individuals. And, you know, that's kind of a natural part of understanding culture, right? You know, we grow as an organism, and you know, we can, you know, navigate between cultures sometimes. So maybe you have a specific culture for your family, for your corporation, for your individual country, for your political party, right? And we navigate between those cultures seamlessly, but over time we also grow, and you know, we can connect with people in kind of more meaningful ways because we're willing to change out that shell. But change is also really difficult, right? Just like with the hermit crab, to ditch your one shell and to go find another shell can be a challenge sometimes. And so, you know, where I go from here in my mind is really to this concept that I call culture eats cybersecurity for breakfast. So there's a famous leadership guru. His name is Peter Drucker. He came up with this quote called you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the idea is leaders, when they come into different organizations, they you know, they have these cool visions that they want to kind of implement. And generally speaking, you know, in his experience, you know, those visions by those executives fail. And they fail because those executives didn't take into account the culture of the organization. They didn't try to align the culture with the vision or vice versa. And you know, what he believed is, you know, to be successful, when he studied successful leaders, you know, he found that the ones that were successful really had a lot of empathy for their employees. They connected with them. They knew what their values were. The employees felt like they were heard and valued. and we're willing to embrace those strategies or whatever to be successful. And I think the same is true for cybersecurity, right? When we try and force security on folks, they don't like it. They don't. It doesn't resonate with them. They feel like it gets in the way of them doing their jobs. And I think if we as security practitioners are solely laser focused on technology to solve all of the world's problems, again, as a strategy, that's going to get eaten for breakfast if we don't also take with us an understanding of culture. So I actually, I had this theory. Okay, well, if culture eats cybersecurity for breakfast, there ought to be a way that we can prove it or demonstrate it or show it in some form or fashion. And so what I did, I took all of the companies that were breached in 2018. And I looked them up on this culture website called Glassdoor.com. So former or current employees can go score their company on a scale of 1 to 5. And over time, as I looked at the companies that were breached in 2018, I kind of found that they fell on this kind of sharp bell curve. But what I realized is that if you had a lower than average Glassdoor rating, you were 3 times more likely to have been the victim of a data breach. So in terms of order of magnitude, that's a huge predictor of whether a company had good security or bad. And it didn't have to do with the technology they had or the industry they were in or the size of the company or the region that the company was located, right? This is all over the country. That culture score was really a great indicator of whether the companies had good or bad security. So thinking about this, there's a great quote from Will Durant, and he said that we are what we repeatedly do, right? So you might have heard this quote before, but that's not the actual end of the quote. He takes that and says that excellence isn't just an act, but a habit. And I think that the companies that had 4 or 5 in terms of their Glassdoor score, I think that was intentional, right? They were working on that. They put things in place to make sure that was going to happen. And so when we think of literacy through secrecy, all of those were very personal habits, right? You can do those things as an individual, but really when you start thinking about culture, we're bringing more than one person together. So you have to recognize that you're a part of a larger group. Some of the things that you do have an impact on the people around you and vice versa. So when you start to change, others will actually start to follow along. And I think, as CISOs, we're asked to create a security culture. And, I think there's actually good news here. We try and think about, when we think about culture, we think of everyone doing the same things. And, I think there's good news here. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to get to 100% to start to change our culture, or start to create that cybersecurity culture. So researchers at Penn studied, how many people it actually takes to create large-scale social change, lasting large-scale social change. And it actually happens when there's just a core group of about 25% of a community. And they studied all different types of communities. So, I think there's really good news that you can make a difference, just by having a quarter of your people start to make that change, to start to be what we repeatedly do, right? And I think if we can see ourselves as the kind of people that value security, that believe in security, then I think we can start to make that shift. And I think we can start to look at key stakeholders and to connect with those folks and build slowly over time. So I like to tell stories in this masterclass. So this person is, her name is Mandy Price. And so Mandy was an attorney. She's actually a family friend of mine. And Mandy, she became a partner at her firm, and worked as an attorney, I think for 7 years or so. But she realized, when she looked so as a total aside to the course, when we think of culture, law firms don't have great cultures, right? They're really stressful. People work a lot of hours. But for Mandy, she realized that, so actually Mandy's not her real name. Her real name is Mandisa. And she realized most of her colleagues, people that might have considered her a friend, didn't actually even know her real name. And she doesn't have naturally straight hair, but she straightened her hair every day. So she felt like she was a stranger in this law firm. And ultimately she decided to leave the firm, and she started this company called Canaris. And they do culture audits. And the idea is that if we can embrace diversity, or whether it's a law firm or other industries, there's 30 years worth of research that shows how companies that embrace diversity become more successful. They become more profitable. And also, with my research, I think they become more secure as well, right? So, when we think about culture, I think we've got to be intentional, and we've got to, grow our organizations with this, core value of embracing security in order to be successful. And so how do we do that? So I want to leave you with some techniques on how to make that happen. And one of the techniques I call the security minute. And so, very easy to do. Just think of how you, whenever you get on an airplane for the first time, the stewardesses walk through and they show you where the exits are, and they show you how to buckle your safety belt, and they show you how to take air from the oxygen mask if that ever happens. That's the first thing they do, right? They're doing essentially the security minute. They're starting out the first 60 seconds of an experience, and they're showing you that they value your safety and security. And I think you can take that back to your organizations. You can take the first 60 seconds of your minute, or you can encourage other leaders in your organization that value security to take the first 60 seconds of every meeting, whether it's a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting, just to talk about, hey, here's the security thing we're going to focus on for 60 seconds, and go. Other folks, you might create culture by having employee orientations, right? And setting expectations for new employees when they come in. If you're a security leader, one of the things they try and do is they meet with the top stakeholders in their organization in their first 60 or 90 days. Stakeholder meetings also very important. Kaizen days. So Toyota was the first to really adopt the Kaizen approach of continuous improvement, and that became kind of a cultural thing. Kaizen days are kind of like company holidays for them, where employees are asked to focus on improving processes. And I think cybersecurity is one area where we can have a Kaizen day and focus on improving our culture. Some companies think about competitions, finding ways to gamify security, baking in security, right? Having a dedicated security deputy of some kind, for every project you have. Or it could be something very easy, like a clean desk policy. So I'll talk about that more in a minute, but it is what it sounds like, right? At the end of every day, you clean off your desk, lock up any important papers. It prevents any accidental loss of information if the cleaning crew is coming through or what have you. But it also is one of those things that's, that works really well when it comes to building cybersecurity habits, because it's something visible, it's something attainable. It doesn't take a lot of effort, but it reinforces that belief that I am a security person. I believe in security, and that's going to translate into long-term cultural change. There's another quote by John Maxwell. I love this. You'll never change your life until you change something you do daily. So the secret to success is found in your daily routine. And I think thinking about how collectively we all have our daily routines, and we can reinforce, our cyber secure world if we can all find those tiny wins to help, build our cybersecurity values and to share with one another. Like I say every time, security is in your DNA. I really think that working together to create culture, right? Culture is something that has grown out of our own biology, our own neocortex, right? And I think that's important, and we should use culture and be intentional about how we create security cultures within our communities. So again, just some sample prompts as they relate to cybersecurity habits. You can focus on the beginnings of things, right? So at the beginning of a project, at the beginning of a meeting, or at the end of every day when you leave for work, you're going to clean your desk off, or when you stand up from your computer, you're going to lock your computer. All of those things are great prompts to prompt you to find cybersecurity habits to start to build. And some suggested habits: use the security minute. Meet with your key stakeholders to kind of start and establish cybersecurity culture. Right, cybersecurity culture starts both at the top as well as from top down, as well as from the bottom up, and we need both to be successful. You can participate in a Kaizen day or play a cybersecurity game. And I think moving from there, that gives us a great foundation to build our habits on. And again, rewards are very personal to you. So think about your recipes for the cybersecurity culture habit, and make sure you're getting both the prompt as well as the reward. So some samples that I'll give quickly. Think about the beginning of a meeting. Start with the security minute, and then have everyone high five each other after kind of reinforcing that message. At the end of the day, I will clean off my desk and lock up important papers, and then my reward on the way home is to play my favorite song in the car. But again, all of these habits, make them easy for you. Make them something, again, as easy as hitting Control-Alt-Delete and locking your computer when you step away, right? It's easy to start to build that perception of yourself, right? You want to believe that you're the kind of person that makes the world more secure. So from here, this is the 5th cybersecurity habit. There are 4 more until we're done. So diligence will be next week, but all of the ones on the right-hand side of the screen are habits that involve multiple people. So now would be the time that you can start talking with your friends or family or colleagues about some of these cybersecurity habits, and see what their values are, right? And see, if you start to believe that you're a security person, see how that impacts the folks around you and what they believe and feel, and have conversations. Feel free again to reach out to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you. We still got the drawing for the coffee mug, so post a review of the book or send in your recipes for a chance to win. And with that, I thank you for being a part of the masterclass, and we'll see you next week.